back to the Romans passage?
You know what? Those are my notes. Got carried away. Yes, the Romans 13 passage. What I wanted to say about that was, when Paul Schneider, see, Paul Schneider, here's what happened with him. When he finally went to jail for the last time, he could have gotten out. He only had to promise not to go back to his congregation. That's all he had to do. Just say, hey, I'm not going to go back to congregation, I'm going to go someplace else. And he wouldn't do it. He said, no, I'm called there. That's where I'm going to go. And you know what he heard from the Nazi leadership at that time? In Romans 13, they said, look, right here it says, you don't obey the government. We're the government. Where does it say in the Bible you have to go back to your congregations? It doesn't say that anywhere, but it does say right here you got to obey us. Thanks for reminding me about that, Ryan. Again, if our interpretation of Romans 13 is exactly the same as those guys, maybe something to think about. Someone else. Yes?
There were people among the writers of the Declaration of Balmain who were in the National Socialist Party, weren't
There were. There were both. Because that was back in 1930. The question, if you didn't hear it, was some of those guys who wrote those two direct declarations that we referred to early on, Dahlem and Barmer, were they members of the Nazi National Socialist Party or Nazi Party then? And yes, many of them were, even back then. See, that's another thing. How did Pastor Snyder see it and the other ones didn't? See, I don't think it's a matter of being especially acute, being like Sherlock Holmes. It's more a matter of courage. Someone else. Yes.
I think courage, but also the more you have the Word in you, the more you see what's different from the Word, and you both right or wrong. But in Germany today, if anyone ever follows how Homeschool Legal Defense Association helps homeschool families over there, you can see that the response from Germany and why they will confiscate children from families and disperse them, keep them away from the families, or even hide them from families sometimes, is that they say parents do not have the right to raise their children according to their dictates, that they have an education system to develop children according to the principles of the state.
That's right. And how many, develop children according to the principles of the state. How many people would have a problem with that today? How many, have you ever heard the term compelling state interest? Yeah. Same, yeah, it is the same, yeah. From what I understand, some of those laws in which they're attacking homeschoolers in Germany, from what I understand, some of those laws do go back to Nazi Germany, were implemented during that time. You know, people don't want to hear it, but you can only fight wickedness with righteousness, and righteousness only comes through Jesus Christ. There is no other source. Churchill apparently made this statement, questioning whether or not the Allies, the United States and England, got in on the right side of World War II, if you can imagine. And he asked this question. He says, was it the right thing to do to call on the wolves to chase off the dogs? Either way, we're stuck. One's as bad as the other. Someone else. Yes?
I think the premise of your presentation is that the church in America, or rather the church in Germany, at that time was starting from the same position as the church in America. By the time of Hitler, the German Lutheran Church had already embraced higher criticism.
Did everybody hear that? In other words, the church by that time was pretty weak, right?
Well, it had turned into primarily a social institution.
Sure.
The church existed because, there wasn't any, you had to be a member of the church in order to be buried. There weren't any public burial grounds. That was all done through the church.
Yep.
In order to get married, you had to do that through the church.
Yep.
So to say, the melding of social institutions and the church was already there.
Yeah. It was definitely on its way. And I think that's why Schneider could recognize it back as early as 1933.
I mean, even today, you rent a burial spot in Germany. When you're buried, you're there for 20 years, and then it goes to someone else.
Wait a minute, you rent a burial plot?
Yes.
It's
How
not
do you rent a burial plot?
As long as
Well-
you pay for it,
What do you do if you're dead?
no, as long as the family pays for it,
Okay,
then you
then you can stay
stay.
entombed.
And after that, you're
No,
out.
up to 20 years. After 20,
20
years,
years?
then it's bodies are sort of pushed down, and the next person is interred on top. They don't have embalming. There's no none of these steel vaults. So the as the bodies decay, more room is available.
Well, you raise a fair point. And if I'm hearing you, the point is, what was the condition of the churches when Hitler showed up? And that's a fair point, because he didn't just drop out of the sky and everybody just said, oh, not worthy. The church was extremely weak. Even back earlier in the 20s, you had their own equivalent of a hippie movement, a bunch of messiahs running around in sandals and hair shirts and claiming to save the world for Pete's sake. And what did the church do even back then? Instead of confronting it, tried to assimilate it. Yes?
It has the same condition today with the church. All of a sudden, Obama shows up and gets elected. Same idea. How did Obama get elected? How did this situation politically occur that we're in? How do we have 430 some representatives and 100 senators that can't even put the cap on the thing? How does all that happen?
Well, ultimately, I would have to say, to begin with, and Obama's definitely not the only one. Can we agree? Can we agree?
If I could make just a brief comment on
Yes.
that. A professor from the Lutheran Theological Seminary spoke at Trinity Lutheran Church in Reading a few months after the election and showed numbers which said, by far, the demographic that voted Obama into office were the Roman Catholics. If you took the Roman Catholics out of the situation, none of the liberals, none of the street people, none of the, it wasn't race, none of the rising liberals within the college, none of those particular demographics would have been able to put him into office. Primarily Roman Catholic.
Yeah. It's a similar thing.
I don't know if his research is right,
Yeah.
but I did attend.
Well, I don't think he's completely off. I mean, let's face it. How many people went to church every Sunday thought Hitler was the greatest thing since sliced bread? And guys like Paul Schneider were in the minority, yes.
Well, to that point, I think the demographics would also show that the majority of professing evangelical Christians voted for his opponent. And I think that tells you something about the sick state of the church. That people would have supported his opponent. And see, this is the problem. The church, instead of, it goes to your whole presentation, the church, instead of standing on righteousness and saying, this is what's right, we look and we try to follow men and people. And that's exactly what happened in Nazi Germany. People said, wow, look at this Hitler. He's a great guy. I'm going to follow him. Yeah. And that's where we are. Whoever the Republicans put up in the next presidential election,
He's not as
you can count on it. The evangelical church will say, wow, he's our man.
Yeah, he's our guy.
Even if it was Hitler.
It's time to think about that. I mean, an election. Stalin versus Hitler.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, that's
I'm voting for Hitler.
pretty much at the time, because of the fall of the Weimar Republic, those were the only choices that were really available.
Yep.
It was either fascism or communism. And as you said, they were fighting wars right down in the city streets between the two political parties.
See, the key for us all here is that I really want us to take away is once you neutralize the Church of Jesus Christ, you're going to get all kinds of horrible options. Whether their names are spelled Obama or whatever, once you take the salt and light out of the equation, what do you think is going to be left over? That's what we really need to get a hold of. What do you think would have happened to that crazy Uzziah? If Azariah and those 80 priests would have stood up and were counted that day, do you think he would have stopped with his little act there in the temple? It would have been horrible for the inhabitants of Judah at that time. Because he would have stopped there. That's where it really has to stop. Yes, Ralph?
It seems, I mean, just for myself, that I keep hearing the church, and it's always, and I understand that as the people.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it needs to be the individual within, the individual Christian within the church body. I think people lose sight of that. I lose sight of that. And I'm always looking for the next guy to maybe pick up where I slacked off. I don't know, I'm getting better at it. But I think we lose sight of that. We just in the church and what I'm learning, and it seems like I want to conform the Bible to a degree to my liking.
Sure.
And how can I tweak it? And I'm finding out that it is very, 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 very specific to numbers and dates and everything. It's not, how can I make the Bible work to my everyday life? I mean, realistically speaking, like what you're talking about, I think to myself, well, if I work somewhere and didn't agree with their morals, but money has me bound there.
Right, you got
things I don't necessarily get, and I think that list goes on and on. And we all have our own little tweaks. I don't care who you are. Well, it's kind of okay, or this is. So I think we settle for that. We're not responsible for our own Christianity.
Yeah, there is, not to get in on this, but we live in this postmodern age where the right thing to do whenever you're in a discussion about anything important, now we can really disagree. Have you noticed? The less important the disagreement, the more you're allowed to disagree. Have you noticed that? We can fight about whose baseball team is better. We can do it loud and long, and we can get really vocal about it. But to the degree that it gets important, how about heaven and hell and eternity? Now we got to talk in terms like this. I don't want to offend anyone. And one thing we want to make sure of is that we all leave feeling good. Whether or not we spoke the truth, irrelevant. We just have to feel good when we leave. Then we get back on the Phillies and we can argue and be real loud again. It's a tough time because whenever you say anything forcefully, you're wrong. No matter what the content of what you said, you're just already wrong. We have time for one more, I think. Yes. One more.
I'm very concerned that nobody leaves here thinking that we should not be involved in politics as Christians. I'm really upset. I don't want people to really thinking that, because even though I'm not saying that, if you're a Democrat, you're not a Christian, or if you're a Republican, you're not a Christian. Our Lord is Jesus Christ, okay? But that doesn't mean that we can't recognize when there is an effort to secularize our nation versus an effort to stand up for the rights of individuals to worship as they wish. And I think that we need to be involved with that at that level. We need to get involved for that purpose.
Indeed, we cannot not be involved. The involvement that we have, though, must be, and veteran people who have been around the political bloc before know this. Back in the day, there were Christian groups that were pretty much recruited to work for a political party. We can't do that. Our motivation has to be the Word of God, the law and the testimony. Isaiah said, to the law and the testimony, if they don't speak according to this, there is no light in them. I think what's happened is we've had so-called Christian involvement, and we don't even know what it looks like anymore. It needs to look like John the Baptist, who had the guts. Think about it. To go to Herod. Tell me, you can't have your brother's wife. What are you thinking? Can't come out of Herod and say, where's it saying Roman law that I can't have my brother's wife? What are you talking about? John the Baptist, what are you talking about that law for? I serve Jesus Christ. I serve the God of heaven. He has an unchanging law, and you can't do that stuff. That's where we really, really have to begin, not necessarily end there. If there's a godly candidate, go out and work hard for that godly candidate. Don't worry about who's going to win. Worry about what's going to happen when you stand before Christ, and he asks you if you did the right thing. All right, this young man has one more question.
I do want to thank you for inviting us. I'm new here. I don't quite have a lay of the land of where you're all coming from. But what would you do if a pastor today here wouldn't take his hat off to the American flag?
Well, let me tell you, let me answer that. That's a very good question. Did everybody hear that? What would you do if, let's say during the pledge, wouldn't take his hat off during the pledge, or perhaps wouldn't take his hat off during the national anthem in a ball game or something like that? What would the approach be? I would want to know why he didn't do it. I will tell you this, confession time. I do pledge the flag, but I pledge to the republic for which it stood. I don't say for which it stands. I can't do it. If a pastor would explain, if we were talking and say, hey, you know what, I can't do it. We got the blood of 60 million dead babies on our hands. The babies don't count, right?
Well, I was thinking more like the CIA cruise missile.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but that's true. But I mean, we're worse. Who's worse, Hitler or us? When it comes to body count, it's no contest. The babies don't count. See, they're small, and that's being done without pictures. We don't have those Holocaust photos of them anywhere, or very few of them. Who cares about them? One more.
I hope that nobody that Nancy is concerned about putting away the action about political economy. I would be very concerned if we ran away with the idea that people are comparing Adolf Hitler with Barack Obama.
Did you hear that? The pastor said he'd be concerned if people were comparing Adolf Hitler with Barack Obama. Now what am I going to do? You said you would be concerned. Yeah, you'd be concerned. Yeah. I'll tell you what. I don't know if that's where the comparison has to be. Here's where the comparison has to be. Does anybody who sits as a civil magistrate fear God or not? Because if they don't fear God, that situation plus time is going to give you Adolf Hitler and worse. I don't care how they start out. That's where they're going to end up with time. Thank you very much for your kind attention here tonight. Good job, Joel.